So welcome to podcast 2. This is Mark Edmonds and
Bill Winter.
And we're ready to go for our second podcast. Hope you enjoyed our initial setup and chat.
Bit of a trial, but we thought that we'd do a draft, and then when we played it, we thought, oh, no, that'll do. Let's go with that.
So today we're going to be a little bit more business focused than just chatting about ourselves. And we thought we'd start with just chatting about what's impacting on business today. And of course, it's about inflation and it's about interest rate rises. And the question is, what are you doing in your business to look at things that are impacting your business that are impacted by interest rate rises and inflation?
Yeah, that's right, Mark. I've noticed, and talking to a few business owners and advising them, not only is it about inflation and interest rates, but it's about the costs, the cost of goods. And I get a bit frightened when I hear about the issues around the gas supply and the electricity supply. And if you've got a business that's 100% reliant on the cost of power, you're going to have to redo your budgets or rethink your budgets, because how do you set a number if you don't know what it's going to be?
And the other aspect, Bill, is obviously to look at all your other costs. If one thing's going up, where can you make savings in the other? There's lots of advice about people that, do get locked into an electricity company and forget to go and check it. There are better deals out there, so it's very worthwhile going and seeing what you can get by going to any of the comparison sites and keying in your NMI number and finding out what's the better deals. And the other thing is obviously talking to your bank. If you've got a loan, go and talk to the bank and don't be afraid to move banks if you have to get that better rate.
Yeah, the one about costs with your suppliers is really important. My example was earlier this week, I was talking to a reasonably large business in a country town or just outside a country town. And we were talking about this very thing, and we're having a discussion about solar panels and what they could do in the future, in the longer term. The question I asked them: do they check the power bills? No, the power bills come in and they pay it. But my advice, and I used to do this in my own business, the beginning of every reading or billing period, I'd go and take a photo of all our meters. And at the end of the billing period, I'd go and take a photo again of the meters and then compare that to what was coming through on the bills. And, of course, in a lot of instances, I don't know now that we've got digital readers and digital, power readers, and whether that is applied today. But the reason I did that was I got power bills where they'd estimated the usage. And it was way out.
Yeah. An estimation goes on with water and electricity. They still do it. If the meter reader can't get nearby or if they electronically can't scan it, then yes, it does happen. The other thing, obviously, too, Bill, is don't be afraid to put your prices up. I've spoken to a number of businesses that sit there thinking, should I put my price up? And my first comment to them is, do a check of your competitors, see what you're offering, see what your value is, what can you add as extra value, but don't be afraid to lift your price if you have to.
Well, and that's why it's important to keep checking your invoices and checking your costs. And the absolute classic is the cost of containers. If you're a business importing goods from overseas, a normal size container, say prior to COVID, was $4,500. And I have been talking to a business in the agricultural area, and that same cost of a container is now $16,000, and they bring in 2 containers every month, and they haven't altered their pricing.
Unbelievable. It's sometimes those hidden costs that you don't sort of take note of, and it's worth doing. So let's move on to what we really wanted to talk about today, which is how can you stand out from the crowd? Affectionately known as competitive advantage, but it's standing out from the crowd. And Bill, you've got a few ideas around this.
I have, and there's often you'll hear people talk about a sustainable competitive advantage. It's if you go into a shopping centre on Monday morning, there's 2 sports stores, and one sports store has got 25% off. Well, what's going to happen by 11 o'clock? The other ones are going to have 30% off. So that minute competitive advantage lasted about an hour. It's not sustainable. I want to go back to a book I pulled out of my bookcase earlier this week called The Blue Ocean Strategy. And this was written, I think, in 2006 from memory. And it just talks about that we're all playing in a congested ocean. It's full of sharks, right? There's blood in the water and everybody's fighting each other. So how do you get out into the calm water? And the classic example they used in this example was the Cirque du Soleil, because the traditional circus was animals, clowns, trapeze artists, and it was all about people and animals. And they charged $20, $25 each to get into it. Along came Cirque du Soleil and reinvented the circus. In fact, they turned it into theatre. And you pay now up to $400 a seat to go to Cirque du Soleil. Unfortunately, they haven't worked for the last 2 years because of COVID. So it's that sort of story. And in addition to that, how many coffee shops do you walk past every morning in your local shopping strip? And just in one area I know of in a country town, there's 13 coffee places you can buy coffee within 5 blocks.
And what's interesting of that, Bill, is of those 13, 2 will be pumping, 2 will be middling, and the rest will probably be empty.
Well, exactly right. And I often ask myself why. There are other examples, and for instance, hair salons are an absolute classic. There are hundreds. In fact, you know that in a town, country town, or like Geelong, it's got the highest number of hair salons per head of population in Australia. So what do you do?
No pun intended there with the head.
That's right. So and I think you've had a bit of experience mentoring somebody here, Mark. What can a hair salon do?
Well, it's interesting. I know of one hair salon located in Queenscliff, and they've gone down the environmental path. So they're making sure that they don't use chemicals, they use organic products. They're heavy into the recycling and giving that point of difference in that they don't use chemicals, full stop. And that's been really interesting. Their business has grown and grown and grown because people do get reactions to the chemicals and the hair dyes, etc., that go onto their heads. And that's been their major point of difference. And I think there was another hairdresser, Bill, that they moved across into doing more around wigs and hair pieces.
Right. Hair pieces and nails. In fact, they set up a separate business during COVID because, like everybody else, you couldn't go into a barber shop or a hair salon. And out of that, they've created a whole new business, and they're importing and now looking at exporting. Another one that I noticed recently is household blinds. Traditionally, you build a house and you put Venetians up or you put just roller blinds up. And over the years, everybody's got into, or there is a proliferation of suppliers because you can import them out of China fairly cheaply, and they've gone into shutters and awnings and everything else. So how does a manufacturer in that area stand out from the pack? It's not easy, but I spoke to a couple of builders recently and said, well, how do you make the choices? He said, well, obviously the client makes the choice, but in his experience, it comes down to the personalities and the sales skills of the people selling the product.
And it's interesting, in the cafe space with COVID, a lot went to take away home meals. So they kept their kitchens going by preparing meals and then letting people take them home. Now that they're slowly opening back up and getting back up, I know of at least one in our area, Little Green Corner. We can name him. He's a good operator, and Hugh's now decided he's been doing so well out of the ready-made meals and creating a set menu that he can deliver all around. He's now into Melbourne, but he's across the Bellarine and Geelong. He's now shut his cafe, and I think he's going to lease it out. Because he can do all the meals he likes and deliver them everywhere with a much smaller team and not the overheads of running a cafe. So he's had to rethink how does he compete in a tight market, because from where he sits, there is at least 4 cafes within 100 metres of his front door. So he's changed his position. He's looked for the blue ocean. He's looked for the safe spot.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting story, and I know who you're talking about. And for instance, in Melbourne and Sydney, or in the capital cities, they've now got what they call, people are opening dark kitchens. In other words, they're not a normal restaurant. They go and set up in a warehouse somewhere, or people will build a kitchen facility in a warehouse, and they'll let it out to various people that come in and want to produce their product, and then they will set up the home delivery. Because we go back to, say, Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers. They were the ones who, I guess, pioneered home-delivered food. But you look around now and you've got HelloFresh, Marley Spoon, Youfoodz, My Muscle Shop, and many, many others. And if you Google, wherever you live, if you Google the local area and just see what sort of home-delivered prepared meals, you'll be surprised how many there are. So that's now becoming a crowded market. So how do you stand out in that? Because suddenly you had it, Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig had on their own, and now they're faced with competitors. So that's an interesting challenge.
So our message to our business listeners is, where's your blue ocean? Have a look at where you need to be. What do you need to do to stand out from the crowd? What is your competitive advantage? Everybody talks about providing the best customer service. Well, what's the difference that you can add to make it the best customer service? It's not about being the cheapest in the market. It's about offering the best value in the market. What else can you do? Bill, what other thoughts?
Well, I guess I'll give you one final example, and it's a couple down in a coastal town, and it's Braille Sign Supplies. Now, the owner of this was originally just a sign writer. He was a traditional sign writer, and once again he was swimming in the red ocean because there were sign writers everywhere, and of course sign writing became digital, and you no longer needed those skills that they had in the past with creative, input, because the computer does it for you. But what Travis down there has done is that he now is the major supplier of Braille signs in Australia and imports all over the place. And you'll find he's found a way that he can put Braille signs using any material. He can place them anywhere. He can put them on any surface. And if you go through Parliament House in Canberra, they're all his signs, all the Braille signs. On most lifts that you go into large buildings, they'll be his signs. And the latest I read about him was that he's even got QR codes now where people can feel them. So there is somebody that took a traditional business, found a niche, and sure, others will try and copy him, but he's got, I guess, the march on it. He's way out in front, and he's always thinking of other things to do. And that just reinforces the lesson you just mentioned, Mark, and that is, you've got to think all the time, is what can I do tomorrow that I haven't done today that's going to put me ahead of my competitors?
Well, Bill, there's lots of learnings out there, and the trick is getting hold of your market, knowing your customer, knowing what you're trying to do, having a plan. We'll talk about business plans at a future episode, but having that plan and looking for the blue ocean, looking for the space that you can stand out from the crowd.
That's right, Mark. Just don't be another one of everybody else.
Okay, Bill, and that'll be our podcast for this week. We'll be lining up some guests over our subsequent podcasts, so stay with us, and we hope you enjoy our chats.